shall be thy royal throne. Take my love, my Lord, I pour. Let thy feet its treasure store. Take myself, and I will be ever only all for thee. Ever only all for thee. If you have never read the life story of Frances Abigail, it would do you good to read. She was a woman truly dedicated, consecrated unto God. This is what this hymn is that we just sang, a hymn of consecration of the life. And for a child of God, this is what we should be. There is a distinct difference between sanctification and consecration. Sanctification is my holiness, this living a sanctified life. But consecrated is that sanctified life dedicated to Christ. And she will go through and name a multitude of things related to our life that needs to be consecrated to the Lord. And I trust as we sing these hymns of the faith that you ponder them. We're not getting hymns like this today. We're getting the contemporary. We're getting the little choruses. And we're getting the evangelical view or the ecumenical view of bringing all the religions together now. And this is why the old hymns of the faith are hated and despised. We've got to have the new. And folks, the new is not what we need. It is the old. It's the ancient landmarks that do not need to be moved. It's nothing wrong with the old. Nothing. It's nothing wrong new with the tried, and it's nothing wrong with the tried and the true. And may God help us to lay hold of that precious understanding in the hour in which we live, because so many professing Christians do not see nor understand. The Bible still saves men and women one way, and that is through the gospel. It's not a new gospel. It's not a new idea. It's not a new thought, but it is the old way of the biblical view of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we can never change that. And there is no other gospel that will save a man or a woman. And we need to be mindful of that. We need to be honest about that. I want to call your attention tonight to Zechariah chapter 12. Zechariah chapter 12. In lieu of what is going on in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas and the atrocities of the last 10 days, I thought that I needed to bring a message not so much dealing with the war and the atrocities that are going on, but to just bring you to remembrance of where we are and what God is doing. And we cannot panic about what's going on in the Middle East. How deep will it go in the Middle East? It does look like Israel is on the precipice of going into Gaza on foot. They have put together already this special unit that is going to go in and supposedly wipe out all of the Hamas leadership. But where is all of this going to place us in prophecy? We're going to hear a whole lot about this today. A lot of it people are going to be speaking about. People are going to be giving their views. People are going to seek to try to give a biblical view when in fact they do not understand the biblical view. And this is why I noted this morning that we need to enter in prophecy in a very conservative way. We need to be very careful. We need to be very prayerful, because while we are given many, many prophecies in the Bible that have already been fulfilled, there are many prophecies that are to come, and there are prophecies that have to be fulfilled, and we're going to have to view it from a biblical perspective. But there's one thing as a child of God I cannot do. I cannot panic over what is looming on the horizon. Concern? Yes. Will it affect us? Yes. But how are we going to confront it? How are we going to view it? And tonight I want to take a few moments. I want to deal with some things, and then we will close our service for today. But before we do, let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer. Father, we live in a world that is upside down. We are living in a world that is complicated, complex, and a world of confusion. We are now watching the rise of the son of perdition, that man of sin, the Antichrist. We are in the times of the Gentiles, Luke will tell us, but Romans 11 will tell us that there will come a day when the fullness of the Gentiles will come to pass. How close are we to this, Lord? We're going to make some comments about this evening. We ask that you would open the Word of God to us, that you would give to us insight. God, that you would help us to lay hold of what's going on, and help us, Lord, to learn to walk with you. The older I get, Lord, the more I make observation of the world in which I live. God, it must come down to you and to me. We have got to learn to view, I'm walking with Christ. It may cost me something. It may cost me greatly. But God, from young to old tonight, Lord, accost and take hold of our hearts, that we might love thee and stay true to thee and count the cost in serving Jesus Christ. And may we find that cost not too expensive, even of what it may cost us. Lord, help us. We ask this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. In Zechariah chapter 12, I'm going to pick up, well, let me go back to verse 1. I want to take a couple of verses of 1 and 2. In Zechariah chapter 12, verse 1, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundations of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. My, how we could preach a message out of that, taking each phrase. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judea and against Jerusalem. And in that day, and that phrase is going to come up over and over again in chapter 12, and that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against them. Now, we see Jerusalem, Judea, Israel mentioned. We are going to see the surrounding nations mentioned. And then we are going to see the earth gathered together against them. But I bring you to verse 10. And I will pour out upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his own son. And shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadad Rimmon in the valley of Megiddon. And the land shall mourn every family apart, and the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart, the family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart, and all the families that remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. When we come to look at Israel today, we must look at Israel in several perspectives. We go back into the Old Testament, we will find in 721 the Assyrians will come in and take the 10 northern tribes. They will assimilate them into the Assyrian culture. I don't have time to go into that tonight, but we call these 10 tribes sometimes the 10 lost tribes of Israel. But God kept 2 tribes for David's sake, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. Now, Benjamin is a very small tribe. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin. But then we have Judea. And out of this word Judea will eventually come this word Jew. And so as in 721 we have the Assyrians coming into the 10 northern tribes. Then in 606, 597, 596, and then in 586, the final destruction by Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is coming in 3 different times. And one of the reasons is because of the rebellion of the Jews. They just won't submit, as Jeremiah had been preaching, submit to Babylon, submit to Nebuchadnezzar. God's not going to reverse his mind, his heart. He's not going to repent of this matter of you going into captivity. You have come to your end of the long suffering and this grace of God, and the city of Jerusalem and Judea will be destroyed, but it will be in 3 campaigns. In the first campaign, you've heard me talk about this many times, Daniel and his Hebrew friends will go. The royal seed will go. They will be taken to Babylon proper, where the palace of Nebuchadnezzar is. The second wave will be men with Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a priest. He's going to go in the second wave. He will not be planted in Babylon proper. He's going to be on up the Tigris River, the Kibar River, which is going to be a tributary. And if I'm not mistaken, and my geography doesn't slipped my mind, he's probably about 500 miles away from the city of Babylon. And then finally, in 586, Nebuchadnezzar will come in, take Zedekiah, all that is left of any wealth. He will slay all of Zedekiah's sons in front of him. He'll put out Zedekiah's eyes. That's going to be the last thing that Zedekiah will see, and they will march them off to Babylon. The city will be destroyed, the walls will be breached and torn down, and the temple will be totally destroyed. And for 70 years, the Jews, or the tribe of Judah particularly, is going to be in captivity. Now we're going to enter into the 70 years, and after the 70 years, Cyrus is going to allow the children of Israel to go back to Jerusalem. All those who want to go back, he is going to allow it. Matter of fact, he's going to allow the building of the temple. Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest will bring back 49,000 Jews. They will build the Zerubbabel temple. The years will pass by. We'll have Haggai, the older prophet, Zechariah, the young prophet. We'll have Malachi, who will come a little later. Matter of fact, Malachi will come between 450, 400 BC. And then we're going to enter into another 400 years of what we call the silent years, where there will be given no prophecy, no revelation at all from God. And then the next thing that will take event is that, and a lot of world history is going to transpire in those silent years. There's going to be the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great. He is going to die suddenly, and of all places, in the city of Babylon. His death is a mysterious death. How did he die? But then his kingdom will be split up, or his empire will be split up into 4 parts by his 4 leading generals. 2 will be abject failures right away. And then 2 will be left. The Ptolemies in the south, or which would be in Israel, and the Seleucians, which is going to be in what would be kind of northern Israel and into Syria. This is going to transpire. Rome will come to the front, or forefront. Rome is going to be the largest geographical empire up to this time. And Rome is going to be noted in the New Testament as the whole world. When Paul talks about the inhabited world in the New Testament, he is talking about the Roman Empire. He's not talking about the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. He is talking about what is the Roman Empire that will go from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Portugal, the Rock of Gibraltar, back to Spain, all the way back to the Middle East, down into Lebanon, down into Libya, and what is Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, that's the southernmost part, back up into Asia Minor, back all the way to Italy. You understand, you know the Roman Empire. In AD, the Jews will now, though, be back in the land from where they came back from Cyrus. They're now going to be populated. But Rome is now going to be a stiff, hard government upon the Jews. They're going to tax them very, very deeply. They're cruel. They're mean. They have a tight hold on them. And yet, in many ways, Israel is going to have liberty that it has never had before, other than under Alexander the Great. They did have great liberty under Alexander the Great. Matter of fact, Alexander the Great did for the Jews what no other king or leader has ever done, because he found favor with the Jews, and that's a long story, and I don't have time to unfold it. He will immediately make the Jews citizens of his vast empire. So he favored the Jews, and then we move again to the Romans. But now our Lord will come. He will be crucified in 33 A.D. They will reject their Lord. And because of that, in A.D. 70, Titus will destroy the city of Jerusalem and the temple and disperse the people. There will be a great diaspora, and this word diaspora means to scatter abroad. So they're going to be scattered abroad. And over from AD 70 until 1948, the Jewish people will be scattered around the world. We'll have World War II. Hitler will seek to destroy all of the Jews. He will take many Jews from France, Poland, different nations in Europe, put them in death camps, gas them, experiment upon them. If you ever have a chance, go to the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., if you've never been. If you really have an opportunity, go to the Jewish Museum that is right outside of Jerusalem. It is a very solemn, serious place, and it chronicles all of the atrocities that Hitler imposed upon the Jews. And an estimated 6 million Jews will lose their lives. If you ever have a chance to go to Massachusetts, I've never been, but there are 3 major stones, and on each stone is carved the name of every Jew that died in the Holocaust. But in 1948, and we can go back into the late 1800s, and I'm giving you a history lesson tonight because you need it. You go back to the late, and I'm not giving you an in-depth one. I'm just giving you an overview, really. But if you go back into the late 1800s, there's the Balfour Declaration. And you need to read it and study the Balfour Declaration. But it proposes a Israeli state. At the end of World War I, going to World War II, Britain will be in control of Israel and the Arabic lands. They're going to divvy it up. The land will be divided up. And Israel will be given a small part of land. Boundaries will be changed. And nations will be changed. Jordan would be called Transjordan. The trans has been dropped. We will have Syria. We're going to have Egypt. Egypt is technically going to possess the Gaza Strip. And this is where we are today. We're talking about the Gaza Strip. But as soon as Israel was declared a state by the League of Nations, it wasn't called the United Nations at that time, and the United States will cast the final vote to make Israel a nation again. Within 48 hours, the nation was at war. but not since 70 A.D. has Israel been a nation. And in 1948, there was this little strip of land called Israel again. It is no bigger than New Jersey. Some will even say, and I tried to verify this, but I couldn't get my numbers straight, but Israel landmass is no larger than Rhode Island. Rhode Island has 1.1 million people living in it today. In 1948, when Israel was given this amount of land, it did not include the Gaza Strip. It did not include the Sinai Peninsula. All of this is the South. It did not include the West Bank. It did not include what is called Samaria. But it was a small strip of land. And there was roughly 1 million people in Israel in 1948. By 1950, there were 2 million people. Today, as of right now, or roughly right now, in Israel, their population is 9,216,288. That's of yesterday, October the 21st, and that's based on the World OMEDA population clock that counts down. So they expect after the first of the year, 2024, there will be 10 million Jews living in Israel. There are 2 million there are 2 million Palestinians living in Hamas. When we begin to think of this, we're going to begin to see that God is going to do miracles. But I want to be careful with this prophecy, because where are we going tonight in Israel? There are 2 key wars that are going on around the world tonight. One in Russia and one in Ukraine. I personally think that war is a proxy war. It is nothing but a political war. It's just a way for the World Economic Forum to get its foot into Ukraine. Matter of fact, our politicians are telling us how we need to support Ukraine, and they're going to have a democracy and all of this garbage, and they're not even allowed to have free elections now. There is no elections. Billions of dollars have been pumped into Ukraine. Your tax dollars, my tax dollars. And they've already traced tens of billions of dollars back to the United States. Where does it go when it comes back here? Well, we don't know where it all goes, but a big part of it goes to the military complex in this country. War is a very profitable and lucrative business. But the Ukrainian and Russian war is not a problem in the scope of what's going on between Israel and Hamas now. This one can blow up into a regional war that will literally reach around the world. Thanks to Obama and Biden, Iran is a powerhouse. We have pumped in billions of dollars, and when you hear $6 billion on the news media, you might as well take it to $50 billion, because if you go back and trace the money, I read an article the other day, this man who has traced all the money that has flowed into Iran since Biden has been the president. There were sanctions on oil. Only so much could go out. That is not even being adhered to now. And I think Iran is moving at least 2 million barrels of oil a day out of the Persian Gulf. And you may be sitting in here thinking, preacher, why is all of this important to me? Because if this were to truly explode into a world war or even a regional war, it's going to affect us. Now, many are going to be jumping up and down and thinking about, okay, are we entering into the tribulation period? Have the seals been opened, or has a seal been opened? Where are we at in this point of history? I don't know. According to what we hold to in our eschatological view, the next thing on the prophetic calendar is the rapture of the church. But folks, we've got to understand something. The tribulation period is distinctly a 7-year period of time. Sometimes it is called Daniel's 70th week. That's important. Found in Daniel chapter 9. You need to read it. You need to give your heart to it. You need to understand it. But is this just a pillar? Is this a foundational springboard, a prelude, as I mentioned this morning, to the tribulation period? Certain things have to be in place for the tribulation to begin. Antichrist has to be on the scene. Is the Antichrist living today? I don't know. I think that is a great possibility. The world is going to have to capitulate, or America is going to have to capitulate to a lot of things. One of those things has already taken place, and this is important. The dollar. It used to be for every gallon of oil pumped out of the ground and sold, whether it was by Russia, whether it was by Saudi Arabia, whether it was by Iran, Iraq, the Arab Emirate countries, all of that oil had to be sold and bought with U.S. currency, the dollar bill. That has changed. And when that changes, that destroys the dollar. Biden's administration is pressing for digital currency. Now, he's getting pushback on it. But you got to understand something. If we go to digital currency, your 401ks, your retirements, your money in the bank becomes digital. It's only paper. I was talking to a good friend this week who usually goes up to the Poconos in the winter in January and skis. The place that he is going this year, same place, sent him an email saying, we have gone cashless. We'll not take cash. But we have reverse ATM machines. And I said to him, what is a reverse ATM machine? He said, I don't know. I've never heard of it. And this guy's into the financial world anyway. And so we just assume that a reverse ATM machine is you put cash in it and it gives you back kind of like a gift card. You've got X amount of dollars on it you can spend, but you don't never pull a dollar bill out of your pocket. We are pushing, the Biden administration is pushing very hard for digital currency. So what does that do to your dollar bill? Let's just say you've got $100 saved at home. You're going to probably wind up with an opportunity to take that $100 to the bank and get it transferred over into digital currency. But when the deadline comes and goes, guess what? It's going to be just like Confederate money was at the end of the Civil War. It won't be worth the paper it's wrote on. I don't care how much money you have. And a lot of people today have got a lot of money, cash money, stashed away because they thought that was going to be the safe way in case the economy collapsed, something happened, at least you'd have currency in your hand. Well, digital currency is going to take that off the table. Did you go with gold and silver, precious metals? I don't know. But Where are we in prophecy? If this thing in Israel explodes, what's going to happen? If Iran gets into it with Israel, make no mistake, somebody will pull out the nuclear weapon. And trust me, when it comes to Hamas, they do not want a second state. We hear this in the media all the time. Let me go back to the geography for just a second. In Israel, the West Bank. The West Bank is on the the west side of Jordan. And it goes across. We've been there. And it's a big old circle. And you go into this circle drive, and it brings you into the West Bank. There are Israeli soldiers there. They're there with their automatic weapons. You go through, and that brings you into the West Bank. This is occupied by Israel. And I want to deal with this word occupied. If I don't get to it tonight, I'll try to deal with it next Sunday night. You go into the West Bank, and you can sense that things get a little tense. But we're fine. We were good. We were relaxed. We went all the way up to Dan. That's the northernmost part of Israel. We stood at the very borderline between Israel and Syria. The very next week when we had left, I believe it was the next week, Syria fired a missile into where we were at. That's how close we were. You could see Syria from where we were standing. You could see some old rusted out tanks and all that had been military equipment that had been left from the 7-Day War. Now I brought you to 1948. Israel immediately went to war with Arabic nations, or Arabic nations went to war with Israel. They did not want it. And it was a strange thing. And in my office, Dr. Billy Martin gave me a book about Jerusalem, and he gives me the history of it. And I wanted to get it out and try to reread it this week. It's a very thick book, but I didn't have time. But it was not that Arabs and Israelis did not coexist. They did. It's just that it was a barren, desolate land, and that's where they lived. And it was only 1 million Jews. There are multiplied millions of Arabs around Israel. There is not one nation around Israel today. Turkey, Lebanon, Syria. If you go up north to Iran, Iraq. If you go to Iran, you're way up now, but coming back. Syria, Jordan, and you come down to Saudi Arabia. You come down to Egypt. All of those are Islamic nations. Millions and millions. The Palestinians, the Gaza Strip, is 25 miles long, 7 miles wide. 2 million people are packed in there. They have a network of tunnels that are 100 feet underground, that where they can slip into Israel, fire these rockets, or they can go in and have terrorist attack. And Israel has to shut all of this down. Something happened 13 days ago. Israel had a severe breach of security. Now you've heard Mossad. Now Mossad is their secret service, like ours in America. These are supposed to be some of the brightest, the most intelligent. Mossad operates undercover. You don't know them. They are around the world. They are in Washington, D.C., but they know what's going on, and they know when it's going on. This is why so often Israel will have a preemptive strike, because Mossad has discovered what's coming. This ordeal has taken 2 years to plan for. They came by sea, they came by air, and they just came in. And they slaughtered thousands, hundreds of innocent civilians, hostages, babies, decapitating them. These are cruel and wretched people. We have seen the hatred of Israel around the world. We would never think that in our nation we would see college campuses by the hundreds anti-Israel and for Palestine. We've got a Palestinian, she is an American, but there's a Palestinian congressman. She is as wretched and wicked as she can be. She is promoting Palestine. She's put a Palestinian flag beside her office door. She has helped with demonstrations. And across this country, universities like Harvard and Southern Arizona and many, many, many others, Black Lives Matter, have come out in opposing Israel. France, Europe. In Europe, they had a massive protest. I don't even know how many people it was. I never saw. I just saw some aerial views of it. I mean, literally thousands of people. Israel is going to come to a place in prophecy where she will have to stand alone. Now, I don't want to get into the politics of it so much tonight because that's a whole nother long list of things. But what is Israel to the world tonight, and especially Jerusalem? The capital was originally put when Israel was declared a state in Tel Aviv. For decades, presidents have promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The United Nations wants to recognize Jerusalem as a universal city. That's a bunch of garbage. It's not a universal city for whatever religion. It's not a city that the world owns. It's a city that God gave to Israel. Jerusalem belongs to Israel because God says so. And that's all we need. We don't have to get into the politics of it. We don't need to discuss the politics of it. And one president finally did do what he said he would do, and that was Donald Trump. And he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And that created a firestorm. But he did do it. And rightfully so, in my opinion. But Jerusalem is truly a trembling cup to the world. What are you going to do with Israel? Israel is taking this thing very seriously. They're viewing it worse than the Holocaust. And they're going in. Now, folks, this is going to potentially cause a great problem. They're going to have to go in with boots on the ground in Gaza. But let me talk to you about the 67 war so you'll understand some things about the West Bank and Gaza. Sometimes we hear, and I'm not going to get close to finishing, but sometimes we hear about a two-state in Israel, the Palestinian state and the Israeli state. Well, we got a lot of problems with that. First of all, the Arabs don't want that. The Palestinians don't want it. Hamas does not want it, and Hamas is a terror group. They're not going to be happy until Israel is completely demolished from Jordan all the way to the Mediterranean. They want every Jew dead. In the Gaza Strip, it was given to them. there was a peace accord signed. And but let me finish the 6 day. I keep jumping past the 6 day war. The 6 day war was truly a miracle war. Now, we must keep something in mind. Israel, from 1948 until this hour, is not a religious nation. Matter of fact, over 50% of the population of Israel calls or views themselves secular. Now, that's a very important word, because when you say that you are secular, you are saying, and you look up the definition, you don't believe in God. You're an atheist. At best, you're an agnostic. They're called Zionists. Why? Because of the land. That's all they care about. The land. The land. In 1967, there's a 6 day war. Israel will take the Gaza Strip, will destroy Egypt's their military aircraft, 90% of their military aircraft and their military bases, and Egypt will be pretty much null and void. In the process of this, Egypt will send troops across the Israeli border. Miraculously, they defeat them. Matter of fact, that's in one day. The first, I think it's either the first or the third day of the 6 day war in 1967. There's a lot of you in here who don't have a clue what I'm talking about unless you've studied it in history. I was just 11 years old myself, but I remember it. But in the 6 day war, it's either the first day or the third day, Israel had air supremacy all over Egypt, Syria, and Israel. Now, when you get air supremacy, you have about got the war won. They defeated the Egyptian soldiers that would cross into the border, their tanks. From the north, they would take out the Assyrians. Jordan would fire a few rockets in. They would take Jordan out quickly. Jordan kind of just shrank back. And if you study history, you will find that Jordan would kind of sway toward Israel. At that time, Jordan controlled the Temple Mount. Israel would take all of that territory from the Temple Mount all the way north to the Syrian border, coming on around to what is Samaria, and then they would take the Gaza Strip. They would take it. They would take it back from Egypt. They would take it from Syria. But there's been this thing, let's have a two-state system there in Israel. They don't want it. That's been offered multiple times. They reject it every time. They want one state, and they want it to be Islamist. And one thing that I think Israel made a mistake in, but although I think it was the providence of God, they gave back the Temple Mount to the Muslims. That's why the Temple Mount is a hot spot today. When we were there, we could go to the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall, but we could not go any further. And it used to be that they would let you go to the Dome of the Rock. They would take tour groups there, but they cut that off long ago. So there's another problem in Israel now. They got enemies to the north, Hezbollah. They've got enemies in the south, Gaza or Hamas. But inside what is Israel proper, 20% of that population is Arabic. Matter of fact, when we were in Jerusalem, Barbara and I were going to strike out one afternoon by ourselves, and we were told, don't go down into the Arabic quarter. Well, somehow or another, I misunderstood the directions that our tour guide gave, and guess where we wound up? Right dead in the middle of the Arabic Quarter. And I told her, I said, we're here, we might as well just walk through and see what happens. We didn't seem to get the most friendliest of faces, but we spent probably, I guess, 35, 40 hours down there, and then we decided we might better clear out. And we did, because it was getting late in the afternoon. But it's divided. You got the Arabic quarter, you got the Jewish quarter, and they commingle. Matter of fact, Israel was allowing, coming out of the Gaza Strip, Arabs to come into Israel to work. Well, all that's been now cut off. That's been stopped. So Israel has the enemy within and the enemy without, and now the enemy is growing around the world. At some point, no nation will stand with Israel. Do not be deceived. Do not be fooled by the news media. This current administration does not stand with Israel. It's the pressure that they have to keep up. They've got to look like it. But they are trying the best to hamstring Bibi Netanyahu. So folks, and I'm going to have to stop because my time's gone. And I'll pick back up, Lord's willing, Sunday night, because I want to get into the scripture of this. Because what has happened in the past is getting ready to happen in the future. What is the near future? I don't know what that is. Maybe next week I can tell you more about it. Because if Israel goes into Gaza by foot, and it's got to, if they're going to take out Hamas, they will have to go in. This is going to be a monumental task because they're going to have to go from high rise to high rise, schools, mosques, because Hamas, they put their headquarters underneath hospitals. They put them in schools. They put them in mosques. Just this past week, our news media, instead of doing their stinking job and researching it, blamed Israel for striking a hospital, which it did not, 400 or 500 deaths, which was a lie. It was a stray rocket by Hamas. It landed in a parking lot. It killed 12 people. But all the news outlets just blew it out of proportion, showed pictures, and blamed Israel. This is what Israel has to contend with. But you got to remember, 50% of Israel is secular today. To them, it's just a land. 20% is what we would call the Orthodox Jew. These are the guys that wear black hats, the black coats and clothes, the white shirts. They've got the curly sideburns. These are the orthopedic. These are the Orthodox Jews. Matter of fact, when we went to Israel, and listen, they're arrogant. Don't think they're not. We couldn't get the plane away from the gate because a bunch of them didn't want to sit down. They finally had to get nasty with them. And they finally sat down. Matter of fact, there was a young man sat beside me, and I don't know what I was doing. I was doing something. I don't know if I was playing a game, whatever I was doing. It's a long, long flight. And he's watching me. And I know he's an Orthodox Jew. I know he's not going to want to talk to me, but it didn't bother me. I tried to strike up a conversation with him anyway. And I said to him, you want to try it? You want to see what you can do with it? Well, he wouldn't touch it. He knew he'd probably get his hand slapped. And he didn't talk to me much, but they're arrogant. The Jewish people are arrogant people. But nevertheless, they're God's people. Even in unbelief, they're God's people. But where are we tonight? And I got to finish. I know I do. Where are we? Where are we? How far are we from the rapture? How far are we from the tribulation? I don't know. But could we possibly, I think this is a strong possibility, be in the prelude? of the tribulation. There's going to have to be a prelude. There's going to have to be similarities. There's going to have to be things put in place that will set up the tribulation. This 7-year period. Does it take another 5 years, another 10 years to get there, another 50 years? Only God knows. When is the rapture going to come? When the rapture takes place, it will expedite the time because God's people will be gone. And we've got to understand, and I'm going to get into this next week, that the church is a Gentile organization. It's a Gentile prophecy of Christ. The church is a mystery. I'm going to deal with that. Many times you will hear that Christianity is a white man's race. Sorry, folks. Christianity is a Jew's race. Jesus Christ was a Jew. And even at the close of Romans chapter 2, the Christian is more of a Jew than the Jews today. But it's okay. I promise you. Will it affect us? Probably. How? I don't know. Do I need to be concerned? Yes. Do I need to pay attention? Yes. You don't need to be doing foolish things alone. Ladies, pay attention. Men, pay attention. But don't panic. That's not what God would have for us. And God's going to bring us through. By God's grace, I don't believe we'll go through the tribulation. Now, there's a lot of eschatological views about that. But even how deep will God take us that it might even seem to be the tribulation? At least the prelude. Jerusalem is a trembling cup to the nations tonight. What you going to do with Jerusalem? But Jerusalem is also being pressed. And there's going to come an hour when every nation will gather against Jerusalem in the valley of Megiddo, and it will be led by the Antichrist. This will be Satan's most pivotal point in all of humanity. But Christ will come, Revelation 19, and he will have the final victory. And we will enter into the 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ. Much, much more to say. We'll have to say it next week, Lord's willing, if Christ tarries. Brother George, will you dismiss us in a word of prayer tonight?